As we've heard there, he was not only marrying into a new religion, but marrying the woman who would become the head of state. What an experience that must have been for him.
Well, an incredible experience. I wouldn't say a new religion, because within Christianity you have the Orthodox branch and the Anglican branch and the Roman Catholic branch. So he was changing branch, really. And he had been at a boarding school in Scotland beforehand, and so was familiar with the kind of Christianity that he was formally received into before his marriage. And, well, what a marriage. 73 years married to not Queen all those years, but most of those years. And how many marriages last that long these days?
Yeah.
And very interesting that in the 20th century, you had this idea that the man was the boss in the partnership, and yet within the state, the Queen was the boss. And the two of them had to work that out. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall at their conversations as they did work that out, but they found a way to manage that relationship in a way that sustained them both, which is great.
Yeah, and the Duke of Edinburgh was also known not only for the separate denominations within Christianity, but as a supporter of Jewish causes as well, the first British royal to visit Israel.
Yes. Now, you mentioned his mother and his great aunt. His great aunt was a nun in Russia at the time of the Russian Revolution, and she was killed for her faith. His mother, Princess Alice, was a nun in Athens at the time of the German occupation there, and she helped Jewish refugees escape from the Nazis and get out of the country. So there's a long-standing link with the Jewish people through his mother, and his mother was buried in Jerusalem. So it made good sense for him to take an interest in the ongoing welfare of the Jewish state.
Yeah. And, I mean, you mentioned his loyalty to the Queen. That is something I think has characterised his position as a consort for so long. Church leaders have been paying tribute to Prince Philip, describing him as a man of deep faith and theological knowledge, and this is all tied in with an acknowledgement of his loyalty to the Queen. He saw that as his primary role, of course.
Indeed. His public persona doesn't portray very much of his personal faith. But in 1966, within Windsor Castle, he set up a small conference centre in which people would be invited to come and reflect on matters of the day from a Christian, from a religious perspective, and to discuss together. It's in the castle, next to the chapel where the funeral will take place. And I stayed there for a few weeks about 20 years ago on a course. And it's an ongoing resource for the country and for the world, in that leading figures in economics and the sciences meet with leaders of the faiths to talk about issues of great importance.
So we were chatting about it before that he seemed to have this desire to sort of apply the theory of religion to sort of have a practical application to where he could apply what he knew of religion to his everyday experience, didn't he?
Yes. With his mother, faith led to action. And with Philip, also faith led to action.
Yeah.
So he took an interest in environmental issues, for example, way back in the 70s when it wasn't so fashionable.
Yeah.
He set up an interfaith dialogue with regard to environmental issues. He chaired an international conference of faith leaders concerned for the environment. In 1989, he published a book about environmental issues. It's called Extinction or Survival, Environmental Issues from a Christian Perspective.
Yeah.
He was involved in the setting up of the Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion back in the 70s. And, of course, the big legacy that people will remember him for is the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme.
Of course.
Which he started way back in the 1950s.
Yeah. And yeah, there's that humanist quality to the Duke of Edinburgh Awards and the sort of principles that it encourages in its members, and that is intrinsically connected to his priorities as a religious man as well. The last point that I have on here, his death has highlighted his example of duty and public service. I think we've mentioned it, but it merits observing in the time after his death, the fact that he has the legacy that is so tied up with, well, people mention his gaffes, people mention the quotes, the funny moments that he's had, the inappropriate moments. We can't ignore those facts. But as you say, the main aspects of his legacy will be the Duke of Edinburgh and his contribution to the progress of, and the unity perhaps, of religion and modern life.
All human heroes have feet of clay.
Yeah.
I think it's right that we expect leaders to hold to high standards, but we have to be forgiving when they make mistakes. And this is a time not to remember the mistakes, but to remember his achievements and his legacy.
And there were so many of them. The Very Reverend Iain Tarrant, thank you very much for joining us.